No, do not attempt to adjust your sets. We are back. John Sapanaro, Matt, Ibby Ibanez here with Till Mets Do Us Part, live on Twitter, live on YouTube. And of course, if you can't watch us live and interact with the show, or you forgot about us because we've been off for 2 weeks and people just forget about you when you haven't been around for 2 weeks, you can catch the replay of this show on Twitter or on YouTube as soon as we end the broadcast. And of course, you can catch the entire show as an audio version, as a podcast, starting tomorrow morning, all courtesy of the Chop Sports Network, wherever it is you get your podcast. So, I didn't think we'd have to do this so soon, Ibby. It is October 19th. The Mets are no longer playing baseball. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that by now. But you and I have not had the opportunity to do this show since the season officially ended for the Mets. So I want to say, how are you? And then you can dive right into your feelings that the Mets were eliminated in the wild card round.
Well, John, just to catch people up, I'm just your average run-of-the-mill millennial who is just getting lost in memes and complaining about Blink-182 tickets. But besides that, I've been I just wanted to apologize since the last time we were on this show. I said it, I'm pretty sure you did as well. Just apologize for the show in general, that we believed that our Mets would make it through and past the Padres series, and that was not the case. And a lot has gone on in the last 2 weeks, a lot of discourse amongst fans, and as always, regular run-of-the-mill Mets Twitter, Mets fandom, whatever you want to call it. It was this break was definitely needed. I was talking with good friend of the show, Aunt Rivera from Subway to Shea, and we were going back and forth. We were like, a lot of people that create Mets content felt a little burnt out throughout September with everything that was going on, and it sucks that it ended, but just being able to, unplug, get away. I don't know about you. I mean, I know you were traveling a lot, so you probably
I was very unplugged. I was very
you're unplugged.
Away.
You were doing
I watched
your thing.
The games. I did watch every game, but being as far away as I was did probably make it easier. I was also having, some life experiences personally that made it a little easier to swallow. When you're I'm not trying to be an ass here, but when you're on the beach in New Zealand, immediately after the Mets lost that game, it is a little easier to swallow. Now, I would not saying I was any less upset or any less frustrated with how things went, but when you can watch that game, the Mets lose the way they did, and then you can get on a ferry and go to a beautiful tropical beach, it does help. It kind of helped put it all into perspective. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but, that's just how it is.
And just to continue John's point there, we were talking potentially like, hey, maybe we'll try to get this in just so we can, stay consistent. He tells me he's about to hop on a beach. I'm like, we're not recording and getting all sad about the Mets while you're on a beach. Enjoy your vacation. We're not doing this. We'll push it. We'll make it work. The break was needed. And it sucks. It sucks. And I'll start it off here. And it's like, I don't like the things I had seen. Like I said, I was unplugged and I was off for 4, 5, 6 days, whatever. And it was fantastic. I wasn't looking at anything, and I was just enjoying other things in life, not focusing on what had just happened. But
I was still getting into fights with people on the beach in New Zealand. I don't know. I'm an asshole. I just have too much of a big mouth.
But I want to start here where I'm tired of the thought process again that you can't have two ways of thinking about one topic, and that being, look, you can be thrilled that the team won 101 games, that the regular season was what it was. You missed the division. That sucks. The way it ended during the regular season, it sucked. But step in the right direction. Plus 20-something games in comparison to year one. Buck, keeping it professional. No things that were out of the ordinary in that sense. You can respect that, and I believe both of us did. And at the same time, you can be pissed off about how it ended ultimately in the playoffs because our team did not show up. Simple as that. And you can even look at the game that they won against the Padres, game 2 against Snell. They didn't do a lot of hitting in that game. There was some here and there, but a lot of it was the fact that Snell couldn't find the plate. And look, a walk is just as good as a hit. We know that. Scoring runs is the name of the game any way you can get it. But yeah, I felt that team just had no gas. Literally, they had nothing left in the tank. There was nothing there, and it showed. And it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing because of how things ended in that third game. Musgrove mowed him down. If you want to talk about, his garlic knot ears, we could do that. It doesn't really matter to me at this point. But, he mowed him down.
I said on Twitter that Joe Musgrove looks like a UFC fighter that's been arrested 5 times for like domestic violence that we all hate. And that was my way of being a prick to Joe Musgrove. But that is what he looks like physically. Like if you took him out of a baseball uniform and just showed me him, I'd be like, oh, that guy's a cage fighter, right? That guy's like just a piece of garbage.
Yeah. And what's incredible about it is like I'm a fan of, like, I like Joe Musgrove. I've been a fan of him for a while, just watching him pitch and how he's evolved over the years. But I can also tell you this: I had Joe Musgrove in fantasy this year, and the second half of the season, that guy fucking stunk. He was terrible. And then towards the tail end, still not pitching well. And then, of course, he comes into our house and he just completely shuts everyone down. And, really, again, like the people were like, oh, he's like, when he did the motion towards the dugout after he strikes out the side, after he gets, his ears and his entire body checked if he was cheating or not, whatever. It's like, I would do the same thing if I was in that spot. You're coming after me in that sense. It's going to amp me up a little bit more, and I'm going to shove it up your ass in that sense. And he did that. So it's like the fact that team managed one hit, that's the thing that pissed me off the most. It's like, I know the guy was pitching well, but you weren't working counts the way you potentially could have. And one hit in a win or go home, do or die game, one hit coming off of the game you just came off of, like, that just shows you it just wasn't meant to be. The team didn't have it. And it's unfortunate. But again, you can have two ways of thinking. You can be appreciative of what happened in the regular season and be pissed off with how the postseason was very short-lived for us Mets fans.
Yeah, and I want to jump into the comments, and of course, shout out to everybody who watches us live on Twitter, live on YouTube. We've been off for 2 weeks, mostly because my travel schedule was crazy. I was in Australia and New Zealand and Finland, and I had a 35-hour travel day one day, and so it was just impossible to try to get together and do this podcast. So we apologize for leaving you guys in the dark when we were, when Mets fans needed us the most, but we appreciate all of you guys, tuning back in. And Ibby and I will be here pretty much all off season. There's kind of that low point where things we might take a week or two off, after New Year's or something like that, kind of the doldrums before spring training, but we'll get into all that later. We'll have guests on, we'll do all the fun stuff, but I do want to jump into the comments really quick before I give my take. Stevie Mac said, old shiny ear Musgrove, and I appreciate that. James Dowling says, also glad to see you're back. We're glad to be back. Thank you. Stevie Mac saying, can we please not go over the wild card series for our own mental health? And look, here we are 2 weeks removed from the series or whatever it's been. And so, Ibby and I are not going to dive into the nitty gritty of breaking down. Oh, should they have started Darren Ruff? Like it's October 19th. It doesn't matter. It is irrelevant at this point. You've heard takes, you've had your own opinions. So not that we want to gloss over it, but we kind of want to give a more overarching view of the season ending. And then really starting to preview, which is a bummer that we're doing it now on October 19th, but really start to preview the offseason because there's a lot of stuff going on with the Mets. So we'll do that in the second half for sure. But Ibby, as I give my take, I want to jump back to James Dowling because he echoes what you said and really is going to echo what I am about to say. The Mets made the playoffs and are still building their organization. Yes. Fans can be sad, but still excited for the future. Fans acted like it was the end of the world. That's where I want to start, is that acting like it's the end of the world mentality. A lot of people that I argued with on Twitter were quick to tell me that I was being toxically positive about this, that my positivity was detrimental to the fan base because I was saying things that were going to set up Met fans for failure. And I just think that is such an unfair way to look at it because, like I have always echoed, you do not get to hold on to fandom tighter than me or claim that you're a better fan than me or a more serious fan than me because you're pessimistic. Met fans, and I'm a Jets fan as well, we all sort of wear this failure as a badge of honor of like, oh, I'm a better fan than you because I've been through worse than you, or I'm expecting worse than you and I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it's like, to me, that's not how I am. And if you want to be that way, that's fine. I'm not saying you shouldn't be that way. I'm just saying that doesn't make you a better fan than me.
Right.
You know, people were like, oh, that's your problem. You're not living and dying by this. Like, I was waking up at 8:00 in the morning to watch a baseball game when I could have gone to a beach in New Zealand 3 hours earlier. Like, I didn't. I was watching these games on vacation from the other side of the world. Trust me, I live and die by these Mets. But when I look at what happened, I just try to take it all in at once. I try to have the perspective. And again, I'm not saying my perspective is right or wrong. I don't sit there in a 162 game season of baseball. I don't look at games as must win until you must win them. Right. You know, I didn't look at games in early September against the Cubs, whatever, even though I wanted to win those games. I don't look at them as must win. Now, the Mets had a few must-win games this year if they wanted to win the division, namely in the series against Atlanta where they got swept. They had one game that they must win in order to control their own destiny. They didn't do it. They lost that must-win game. Then the Mets had a must-win game in Game 3 against the Padres. They didn't win that game, and now they're home. So I just look at these things a little bit more measured. And it doesn't mean that I care any less. It doesn't mean that it didn't frustrate me and piss me off that the Mets came up flat. Look, the Mets had 6 unbelievably big games this year. The series in Atlanta and the wild card series. And the Mets showed up flat for all of those games.
Yes, every single one.
I have long said to you, Ibby, that the Mets' advantage this year was their 5 superstars: Jake, Max, Alonso, Lindor, and Diaz.
Yes.
And apart from Edwin Diaz, the 4 other guys showed up small when the games mattered the most. Now, I still love all of them. I still want Jake back. We can talk about that in the second half when we preview what's going to go forward for the Mets. I still think Max Scherzer was a great signing, even though he sort of shit the bed in the 2 biggest games of the season. These things happen. I still love Lindor. I still think Alonso should be a Met for life. And I want the Mets to bring back Diaz because he was the only one who did his damn thing throughout all of those games when given the opportunity. Having said all of that, I still have a tremendous amount of pride for the Mets finishing with 101 wins. Why? Because you can't take away the fact that that is the second largest win total in 60 years. Ibby, every year, and I'm not trying to say this to be revisionist. Every year, some team wins the division. But there are entire seasons where no team wins 100 games. No team in baseball. Now, this year, the Mets, the Braves, the Dodgers, and the Astros all won 100 games. It's a bummer that the Braves are in the same division as the Mets, and winning 101 games didn't win the division for the Mets. That sucks. But you can't shortchange and go, oh, it's just 100 wins. It means nothing. And that's not me taking a consolation prize of not winning the division and getting bounced in the wild card. But if anything else, what I said remains true in that you don't necessarily need to win the division. This is a crapshoot playoff structure that the MLB has built. It's the NHL and then followed by the MLB in terms of,
and it's showing right now. It's showing right now. It's showing right now because we're talking about look again, not revisionist, not protecting the Mets, but everyone wanted the fact that we wanted the division. We did, but everyone. The main thing that people wanted was the whole idea of being able to set forth their rotation, set everything up, give guys rest, all this stuff, and then every team that got that got bounced, and that's the case. And I want to throw this in there real quick. I don't know if it's going to take us off into a different place, but
just want to be really quick about one thing.
Good.
Dude, I know the Astros swept that series against the Mariners, but they were on the brink. I mean, walk off, like they were on the brink. For a team that swept, they were on the brink. The Yankees were on the brink.
On the brink, big time.
And then the Dodgers lost and the Braves lost.
Right.
So, I don't want to say change the playoff structure and all that stuff. It's 1 year. But what I said going into it, I still maintain, and this is based on decades of stats. I don't know if a bye is a good thing for a baseball team. It's a great thing in the NFL. It's a great thing in the NHL where guys are getting beat up. Baseball is a daily sport.
Yes.
And I do think if they keep this structure, teams will adjust and it will become a true advantage. And again, this is not revisionist. This is not me going back and saying, oh, see, it didn't matter if we won the division or not. No. I still wanted to win the division.
Right.
I still wanted the bye. Let the chips fall where they may. Also, just tangibly, it's better if you have to win less games. If you're playing one less series and you have to win less games to win a World Series, obviously that's better. And setting up your pitching does go a long way. But the teams that got to set up their pitching, 2 of them almost lost and 2 of them did lose. So I don't know right now that time off, especially that much time off. The Yankees and the Astros had 8 days off. You want to tell me you play 3 games in that wild card round and it's just 3 games off and then all of a sudden you're back to it? Boom, boom, boom. Fine. But 8 days off is a long time to not play baseball when you play every single day. So I'm not saying they need to change the format or anything like that because my team lost or because, 3 teams that won over 100 games all lost. I don't think that they need to do that. But I'm just saying, I said it before and I will stick to my guns on this. I don't know if all that time off is a good thing.
No, and to just continue your point of the playoff structure, it makes me so angry. And again, I hate feeding into the media and stuff like that, but we're complaining about a playoff structure now. Look, a lot of it's screwed up because everything is condensed from the lockout and they're trying to get everything in by a certain day. Like everything is getting pushed up. Rain has ruined things for some pitching staffs and for some teams as well. But the fact that the Mets win 101 games and are mocked and are criticized and are viewed as an absolute joke when they lose to the Padres, then the Braves and the Dodgers go out there and lose, and then instead of making fun of them and saying how pathetic they are and how 109 or 112, however freaking many games they won, or the red hot Braves, they lose. Instead of making fun of them, it becomes, oh, we gotta look at the structure. We should be changing things. I'm not saying the guy's name, like always, I'm just going to say his initials B.O. And the fact that he's saying stuff like this after making fun of the Mets for losing and then complaining that, the number 1 seed should be able to pick who they want to face, or they should be able to do this, or they should be able to do that. It's like, no, guys.
First of all, the number 1 seed being able to pick, that is clown
stupid.
Shit. That is so ridiculous. When they floated that out there as a potential playoff structure, that is like, people want to talk about like video game baseball versus real stuff. Like that is the biggest clown maneuver. Anybody, like the fact that Buster Olney could say that with a straight face is wild to me. Picking the team that you get to play is absolute dog shit for a professional sports league.
Yes.
That is so dumb because there's a system. 1 plays 6 or 1 plays 8 and 2 plays 7. Just do it that way.
Just do it that way. Very simple. Very simple. So when I saw that nonsense, that really bothered me because again, it continues. It becomes what I said it was going to become the last time we recorded. I said if the Mets lost that series, the reason I thought that they would push and they would play better and win was because it was about erasing narratives. It was about erasing LOL Mets. Because I said to you, if they lose this series to the Padres, it's going to come back in full force. And it did. It came back in full force. It's LOL Mets. And then, of course, when others lost, it just becomes a talking point for something else instead of continuing and keeping that same momentum in terms of what the talking point was against the Mets, but we're going to change it for the Dodgers, for the Braves, and I guarantee you a word wouldn't have been said for the Yankees either.
Well, what's funny is that it brings me to my next point, and it brings me to actually the comments, and there's a lot coming in, and we'll get to as many as we can. James Dowling says, let them mock and make fun of the Mets. In the long run, they will be on the wrong side. And again, this is not me rose-colored glassing this situation. It's just the facts. It is the tangible, realistic facts. For the bulk of your and my fandom, Ibby, basically our entire lives, the Wilpons have either owned the team outright or co-owned the team with Doubleday, right? Yes. Now, I know there's some commenters who go back further than us, and that's fair. And they've seen longer and more baseball than us, and that's fair. And they go back to a time that predates the Wilpons, and all of that is true. But in the Wilpons' ownership of the Mets, you could argue that almost at every turn when the Mets were successful, they were successful despite ownership.
Yes.
They were successful
against
the rules of what you would think makes sense. Because when the Mets went out and spent a ton of money, what did we come up with? The worst team that money could buy in 1992 or 1993, whatever team had that moniker, right? Mm-hmm. Before Madoff, the Mets were a top 3, top 5 payroll team. And they were terrible. Jeremy Burnett, Roberto Alomar, Jeff D'Amico, Roger Cedeno, spending all this money on players and being terrible. Whether they spent money, didn't spend money, whether they were cash poor or they had deep pockets, whatever it was, they were never consistently good. You could argue the 2000 Mets never should have been in that World Series. The 99 Mets were a better team, right? You could argue they just got there through sheer force of will. The 2015 Mets should have not been where they were, should have not been on that run. It took Sandy Alderson, we have to bring in pieces because this team is good and we're at the deadline and we have to try and we have to go get a guy like Cespedes, despite the fact that you may not want to do it. It was sheer force of will once again. The only outlier to that is the 2006 Mets that were far and away the best team in baseball that year with the Yankees. But what happened after that? 2 unbelievably bad collapses. We thought we were going to have actual real collapses.
Yes.
We thought we were going to see sustained success, over that run, and we never saw it.
Nope.
They've always been a cycle of boom and bust, with more bust than boom.
Yes.
The reason why it's different now, and to James's comment that I bring back up here, the reason why it's different is because of Steve Cohen. This team this year is not good by accident. This team this year did not win 100 games by accident. First of all, no team wins 100 games by accident.
No.
This team did not have a 20-some-odd game improvement from the year before by accident. This team is run well. This team is managed well. This team has people who know what they're doing at the top down, from the ownership, through the front office, through the manager's office. This team will be there again. Now, will the Mets win 100 games next year? No idea. But I know this, Ibby. This Mets organization will put out the best team they possibly can heading into 2023. To win as many games over the course of 162 as they possibly can. And with that, they will be in a position to potentially make the playoffs. I can guarantee that. And it doesn't matter if they win 100 games. It doesn't matter if they win the division. Why? Because we're seeing it right now. The Padres finished 22 games behind the Dodgers. They lost 14 of 19 in head-up competition to the Dodgers. What'd they do? They beat the Mets' brains in, and then they beat the Dodgers' brains in. The Phillies looked up and were laughed at all season long by Braves fans and Mets fans. And where are they? They're the last team in the East standing. Yes. You don't have to win 100 games. You don't have to win the division. You have to be good enough over 162 to put yourself in a position to get into the dance. The Mets will do that next year. And the Mets are probably going to do that the year after that. And the Mets are probably going to do that the year after that, because they have ownership that is willing to do it, and they have competency. And to me, Ibby, that is the difference. We're not sitting here, you and I, going, well, the Mets have Jacob deGrom as a free agent. He's probably not going to be back. And the Mets have Edwin Diaz as a free agent. He's probably not going to be back because the Wilpons aren't going to pay those guys. And man, you really hope that this prospect pans out because the Mets aren't going to pay this guy. And look, the Mets have a glaring need, and Aaron Judge fits that role, but the Mets will never pay him. And wow, it'd be great to have a guy like Trey Turner, especially if Brandon Nimmo doesn't return, but the Mets aren't going to pay him. You can sit here and go, the Mets might get Aaron Judge. It's real.
It's real.
The Mets are probably going to bring back Edwin Diaz, maybe before free agency even starts. That's real.
Yes.
Jacob deGrom, maybe he won't be on the Mets next year, but it's not going to be because the Mets let him walk like they let Zach Wheeler walk. You know, the
Oh,
Mets have a
dagger in my
glaring
heart.
need for power, and you got a guy like Aaron Judge sitting out there. Maybe he returns to the Yankees, but you know what? The Mets are in it just as much as anybody else is. Why?
Yeah.
Because of Steve Cohen's wallet. That's why.
Yeah. The one thing I was just gonna say, just to put a bow on what we were talking about before, it's like it's amazing how people are so forgetful when last year's champions, the Atlanta Braves, were an 88 win ball club, and they went in, they beat a 95 win Brewers team, and then beat a Dodger team, and then beat a Houston Astro 96 win team. So it's like, again, it's timing, it's getting things right, it's getting hot at the right time. Like that's baseball, Susan. That's what it is. And I know people are pissed off about the season in general, but it's like we're on the right track. We have the proper people in place. Are there deficiencies in this team? Yes. We're not saying that there's not problems in problem area. Like, but guess what? We actually have a group of people now that can go out and correct these wrongs. Pay the people that need to come back. Is everyone going to be back? No, they're not. Just make peace with that. You're not going to be able, and again, I'm not saying you're not going to be able to afford it, but to a point you've made in the past, it's understanding that this is a team that's going to be competing always on the go. Things are going to be coming in, things are going to be going out. It's not always going to be the same. So again, it's just being comfortable with that and understanding that we have an owner that's going to be able to fund a winning product. Again, it's still the idea, we take it back to that original Dodgers model, it's still the idea of spending money early, putting a product on the field to try and win while building that infrastructure. We had a great draft last year. A lot of talent came in. Because of the spending, they're going to lose some spots and they're going to drop back in this draft this year. But again, it's about making smart decisions in that sense and allowing yourself to let a Brett Beatty come up and help you, and allow a Francisco Alvarez to come up and help you, which then supplements money that you can be spending instead of at the catcher spot and third base, and you can spend it elsewhere and go get another star. So you're not having a $500 million payroll, which was never going to be the case with Steve Cohen, even though people across Twitter believe that he's going to have a $500 million payroll. It's not going to happen. Do I think he's going to spend? 1,000%. Do I think you're going to have a superstar every position? You're not. You have to make peace with that. They're going to make the proper moves. Again, don't be shocked. And again, I'm saying don't be shocked because the offseason we just had this past year was damn good. But don't be shocked if it's similar to something like that, where you're going to get a superstar, maybe two, and then a couple of fill-in pieces, some guys in the pen. It's not going to be where you're like, oh, we're re-signing Jake, and we're getting Judge, and we're re-signing Diaz, and we're going to get Justin Verlander, and we're going to get this guy, and we're going to, like, it's not going to be like that. This isn't a video game, okay? Guy's going to spend, but guy's going to spend smartly, which is what this organization was not doing prior to this ownership.
Well, it's funny because a couple of things. Like you say, yeah, they're not going to have a $500 million payroll, and they won't. But I'm here to tell Mets fans, we might have a $350 million payroll.
It's possible.
That's possible because just look at the needs that the Mets have to fill. Look at the free agents that the Mets have to try to bring back. And like you said, not everybody's coming back, and they're not going to have a superstar everywhere. But just with the payroll the Mets already have, they're already close to that third-tier luxury tax threshold.
They are.
And for a guy like Steve Cohen, if you're going to go over it, you might as well just go over it.
Yeah.
Go over it. So if you're going to spend 310, you might as well spend 350. Also, because like you said, the Dodger model was to spend early. And Steve Cohen said he wants a World Series within 3 to 5 years. What year is next year, Ibby?
That'd be year 3.
Year 3. So I think you're going to see. Now, I don't say that the Mets are always going to have a $350 million payroll.
No, it's going to be the ups and downs.
Not every single year, but I do think they're in a position now where you could see them escalate that number and go over the luxury tax because they will have a couple of people making not a lot of money. I think there's a chance Alvarez is starting and Beatty is starting, and I think there's a chance that you're going to see one of the younger arms in the rotation like McGill or Peterson or maybe both. We could talk about that. Save it for the second half. We also have a lot of comments coming in. We're not ignoring you guys. A lot of them are more second half comments in terms of what might go on in the future. So we'll jump into all those coming up in a bit. But Ibby, you mentioned what the Dodgers do. And two things I want to bring up about the Dodgers. If you could argue that there was one team in baseball this year that was 26 players deep, it was the Dodgers.
Yes.
You saw it reflected in how well they played in the regular season, and you saw it reflected in what they were expected to do in terms of going on a run. It didn't work out. They still got beat. They got beat by the same team that beat the Mets. So there you go, right? You can argue that there's flaws on every roster except maybe the Dodgers, and the Dodgers still didn't go much deeper than the Mets in terms of the fact that they lost in their first playoff series as well. Mm-hmm. The other great point you bring up about the Dodgers is that they turn their roster over all the time, and that really has to do with what the Mets can be expected to do going into next season. The Dodgers acquired Manny Machado, and people thought, wow, there's no way that the Dodgers will let him walk. And they did. The Dodgers acquired Max Scherzer, and everybody said there's no way they're going to let him walk. And they did. The Dodgers acquired Trey Turner, and then they let Seager walk. And they might let Trey Turner walk.
Trey Turner walk, yeah.
Why do they do that? Because they can. Because they fill in the player. They fill in that position with a different player. You know, maybe a better player, maybe a prospect, right? Like you could argue that Trey Turner is a better player than Seager. And so they let Seager walk to keep the better player at his natural position at shortstop. Well, when they went out and got Manny Machado, Justin Turner was hurt. Now, Machado's a better player than Justin Turner, but Justin Turner was also under contract already. And so they turned around and they were able to fill that role with Justin Turner back there again. You know, they're able to move things around on the chessboard. All of a sudden, they turn around and they have a player like Gavin Lux, who they really like, who took time to develop, but they filled that role by going out and getting a player like him. Can you not hear me?
No, I can't. I was listening to somebody else in the room.
I got you. I got nervous for a second because I was going off on a rant. But anyway, the problem is that that's what you're going to look for. That is the model. That is what you're looking for. That is what you're looking to build if you're a Mets fan. So, you know, I just look at the Dodgers kind of being the perfect example. And I do want to jump into some of the comments and shout out some of the people who are watching. David says, welcome back, guys. Thank you. It is nice to be back. He said, before we get into the second half comments, he said, the regular season would have been a bit brighter for me had they not fell flat on their face in September. Aside from that month, it's a really good season. And you know what? That is a very fair critique.
You're not wrong.
Not going to say that. You know, looking back, yeah, they fell flat in September and they lost a lot of winnable games and maybe things would have been different. But you know what? Maybe things wouldn't have been different because the Braves won that division and it didn't matter for them either. They were as hot as could be, and it didn't matter. So James Dowling said, little inconsistent down the stretch and seemed to lose what made them better in the beginning of the season with long, patient at-bats. And then he said, maybe I didn't watch enough games. But you know what, though? I think that's another fair critique.
That's another fair
the
one.
Mets got away from what made them so good, and it is what it is. He also says, pieces, have the pieces and get hot, I think is what he means, at the right time. That's all it takes. So, you know, it really echoes a lot of what we've been saying. Ibby, I'm going to leave this up to you. We're a little over 30 minutes in. I've pretty much said everything that I need to say to eulogize this season. We have a lot of comments, like I said, that look towards what the Mets might do in the future, which I think is better for the second half. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we take a quick break and head into the second half where we preview the offseason and some of the things that this team might do going forward?
No, I mean, the only thing I would say is that, like I said, the break was needed. It feels proper to talk about everything now. And I'm at peace. I'm at peace finally with everything. It sucks. It's okay. Like I said, I think I said it best at the beginning for my thoughts. It's just, this was the most fun that I had for a Mets regular season. Probably the best team that I've seen. Like to be able to truly respect everything what this team did throughout the regular season. And I can appreciate that. And I can also be disgusted at the same time with how it ended. And yes, there are things that need to change. We'll talk about some of those things in the second half in terms of what moves can be made. And other than that, I'm ready to move on. I'm ready for 2023, and let's get into it.
Yeah, perfectly said. So we'll head into the break now then. We'll come right back for everybody watching live. And you're like, I don't want to sit through a break. Don't worry. The break's about 10 seconds. We just need a little ad break for all the people that listen to this as an audio podcast starting tomorrow on Spotify, Google, Apple, Amazon, all of those places, wherever you get your podcasts. But in the meantime, we are live on Twitter. We are live on YouTube. It is Till Mets Do Us Part with John Sapanaro and Matt Ibby Ibanez. We will be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back. See, I even startle Ibby with how quickly we come back. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, Till Mets Do Us Part. Really spent the first half eulogizing, as I say, the first or the season that was for the Mets. And now we're going to talk a lot about what the Mets should do, could do, what we want them to do, what they need to do, what we think they might do, all of those things heading into the offseason and into the 2023 season. David did say, you should be able to build a pretty good team at $300 million. If you can't do that, that's a problem. And that is Steve Cohen who said that. Ibby, I agree with that sentiment.
Yes.
I agree with Steve Cohen. I think if you're spending $300 million on payroll, you should have a good team. But I don't think that is saying that he won't spend more than that. And the reason why is because, like I said, the Mets are already with their committed contracts pretty close to that number. I don't know exactly what it is. I think it's around 280 or something like that. And with all the players that the Mets have to either try to bring back or bring in new ones or whatever the case may be, they're going to eclipse 300 million. So that's why I think that they'll probably wind up being in the 350 range or thereabouts, maybe slightly less. But I think that that's ultimately where the Mets need to be, quite frankly, if they want to try to win a World Series next year. Because look, they were a good team this year, but they have a lot of pieces that aren't returning, some that they're going to want to bring back. They're going to want to inject some new blood. And while I think there are some prospects on this team that will probably be playing, the Mets don't have enough depth yet to be able to fill in all those positions all around the roster. So where do you think, where do you want to go with this conversation? Do you want to talk about what you think the Mets are going to do or what you want the Mets to do? Like, what is your feeling now that we've had some time to digest the end of the season and look forward to the offseason?
Well, I think that I think we should start where everyone else seems to be starting, and that's talking about the giant elephant in the room and thought process when it comes to our ace, our superstar, our Jacob deGrom, and understanding and getting an idea of what we think is going to happen with him, mainly because I think that he starts the overall domino effect of this entire offseason. Even though, like you said, like you mentioned before, and it's true, like a team that's competing right now, a team that is close in terms of a couple pieces away of being a World Series contender, like they were this year, they want to stay in that spot. I think Edwin Diaz is a no-brainer to just bring back because when you're a team like that, you want the closer. So I think that gets done. But in terms of the overall makeup of what this team's going to be, not only this upcoming year, but really moving forward over the next potentially, say, 3 years, is really what's going to happen with Jacob deGrom. And if he's here, what that means for how they're going to allocate money elsewhere. And if he goes, how you're going to choose to spend that money. So I think we got to start with Jake.
All right. Well, let me start by saying this. I want to preface it by saying that I want Jake back. I don't know if we're going to get Jake back, and we could dive into that in a second, but I want Jake back. Mostly because if he's healthy, I still think he's the best pitcher in baseball, but also because I think it does signify something for legacy. I think there's a shift in tone. You know, the Mets traded Tom Seaver and they got rid of Nolan Ryan and all that stuff. And I think, you know, if you keep Jacob deGrom around for life, it kind of does a lot to maybe heal some of those past wounds. So I think it is a legacy play as well. Having said that, I think that Edwin Diaz is the most important must re-sign piece. And the reason why I say that is because if Jacob deGrom decides to leave, they still have Max Scherzer. So they still have an ace. They still have a number one. Now, it's a shorter lived number one, right? Because he's only guaranteed one more year, plus he's going to be 30. But they do have him under contract. The Mets have, I think, 6 or 7 players, I don't have the list in front of me, under contract that are in the bullpen right now. And the names are not ones that you're going to love, right? Adam Ottavino, free agent.
Okay.
Seth Lugo, free agent. Edwin Diaz, top of the list, free agent. There are so many players. I think Joely Rodriguez might be a free agent. Like there was Joely I think has 1 year of control. But there's a lot of players that played a role in the bullpen that are not guaranteed to be back. And even if some of them were, none of them are Edwin Diaz. So like, for instance, Seth Lugo, if he was under contract, great. That would be easier, but he's not Edwin Diaz. Yeah. Adam Ottavino is not Edwin Diaz. Michael Givens, not Edwin Diaz. Trevor May, not Edwin. Like these guys are not Edwin Diaz. So they have no replacement for him. And closers are important, to your point, on a team that is trying to win a World Series. You need to have a closer. You need to have an ace, but they already have one. So I think if we had to rank them, I think number 1 is Edwin Diaz in terms of must re-sign. I think number 2 is probably Brandon Nimmo. Now, I give that a caveat because I would like to see them pursue Judge. I think it's a no-brainer to pursue Judge, and this is kind of a twofold argument here. But let's say Judge is out of the question. The Mets don't really have a replacement for Brandon Nimmo, so I think he becomes much more important. And I think Jake is probably number 3 on the depth chart because while I think the Mets could go in 2 different directions with Nimmo. They could either bring Nimmo back, or they can pursue Judge, or they could pursue Trey Turner and then move pieces around in the outfield to make Trey Turner work at, let's say, second base. But I think with Jake, having Max there goes a longer way than either one of those other 2 players. And so, I don't know. That's my feeling just off the rip. That said, I think there's more of a chance. Man. No, you know what? I'm going to take that back. I'm not going to say that next bit. Just your reaction to ranking sort of the importance of bringing back these 3 free agents.
I think that obviously in the perfect world, I want Diaz, DeGrom, and Nimmo all back because I think that they all play an integral part in this team. To your point about having the ace in Max and thinking that it can push back Jake a little bit. It's again, what I'm about to say is kind of it can go either way, mainly because Jake hasn't been healthy enough for me to make this like a rubber stamp type of statement. But it would be like, okay, I watched Max the last 2 years now really flame out towards the end of the year and look like he's really tired in the playoffs. So it's like, I get that he can do those things during the regular season, and he can be afforded some rest here and there. And mind you, I know he was banged up. I know it was the body. I'm not saying at all that the guy's washed. That's not what I'm saying. I think his body was hurting him. I think he was pitching through some things, and I think he took it upon himself to, get tough, knowing in the spot that he was in and the responsibility that he had. And he chose to pitch through it, which is why, I think it's kind of why he said that his mechanics were off in that playoff series or whatever. And the comments he made to Ken Rosenthal saying he couldn't wait till they get to the offseason so he get his body right. Having said that, I still think that, the idea of having, even though, look, this starting rotation is going to be old. We know that it's going to be an older staff. But here's the thing, Jake is younger. And I think the fact that he doesn't have as much mileage, he does get banged up, but I just feel that I think that Jake is still the priority, and I say that mainly because it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money that I think can affect what happens more so with a Nimmo, more so with the rest of how you're going to build up the staff if you let him go. But I also believe that when it comes to DeGrom, I think it's almost cut and dry. Epler came out and said they had the conversation. He knows how we feel, and we know how he feels. Well, if that's the case, then if it just comes down to numbers, this should be rather quick, and then you can just move on to the next thing and how you're going to attack whatever you're going to attack. But this is where the media has created all this back and forth where we don't know, or you're not getting anything because the guy doesn't talk to anybody. So you're assuming he hates New York. He wants to leave.
Right.
He's a family guy. He wants to go down south. He doesn't want to be here anymore. He's older in the tooth, so he wants to go home. It's like all these things. But if they know how each other feels, if this is truly a money thing, if he's just looking at it and saying, look, I see what Max got. I know what I'm worth. I'm younger. I want to stay. Pay me the money. If it's as simple as that, this should take a couple days. You're done. You're set. Then you know how you're going about the rest of your offseason. Then you know how to attack Nimmo. Then you know how to attack Diaz. Then you know how to attack the rest of your entire plan.
Yeah.
But it comes down to the thought process. We don't know. We've had discussions when we had Casey Stern on about the potential of Jake 50-50, how we felt. Is he coming back? Is he going to go? Does he want to be here? Look, I think that it can be very cut and dry if he is upfront. If he says, guys, I don't want to be here. And then you say, look, we're going to offer you the same thing as Max. We're going to tack on another year. 4 years, $45 million a year. It's yours. And if the guy says no, then guess what? He doesn't want to be here because the money's there. You're not going to get that elsewhere. You clearly, it's not a money thing for you. Then you can say, okay, I can prioritize everything else. I can bring back Nimmo. And at that point, you could say, I can bring back Nimmo and I can still talk to a judge. I can still talk to someone else because I still have a lot of money to play with. I just lost out on $40+ million a year to give to someone who's going to go somewhere else. Now I can attack something else. I can pay a Nimmo $20 million if that's what it takes, $18-20 million, and then I can go elsewhere and I can say I'm gonna pick this as well. So I think that because Jake is so much money, I think that that's where it has to start, just so you can set forth how you're going to go about the spending. That's why I think he's one. And because of what you said before, it's the legacy play. It's the guy that everyone knows is the best. And it's, let's be honest, it's the PR and it's the fear of a guy leaving you and then sticking it up your ass later on. Like, look, the worst nightmare is the guy takes a little bit less money for a 2-year deal to go pitch in. Like if he signs a 2-year deal in Atlanta for $80 million and then he wins 2 championships in Atlanta over the next 2 years, then how's that going to let Steve Cohen look? Because I guarantee you the way it would go is, he let Jake leaves because Jake was he didn't offer enough money for Jake or whatever, or they let him go. It's like, he's not worth that anyway. It doesn't matter. But then Jake goes out and he does Jake things, and then he beats you, and then you complain about it and say, Cohen didn't pony up. He didn't pay the guy. Now that's a discussion 2 years from now. Yeah. But I think that is going to be something that does weigh on this franchise because it's what happened to this franchise for so many years. You let someone go, they become a star elsewhere. We've talked about it on this show. We've said Michael Conforto as the example. If he goes and becomes a star somewhere else, so be it. It wasn't going to happen here. Travis d'Arnaud, here for 6 years, never a star, goes to the Braves, becomes something. Was never going to happen here. Right. I think Jake's a little bit different. That's why I think it's going to start with him.
Well, and James Dowling says, only way DeGrom doesn't come back is if he doesn't want to, which is echoing everything you just said. And then I believe it's pronounced Rael, follows us on Twitter, is super active on Twitter. And I think, exactly. And I think first-time commenter, maybe first-time watching live, 100% believe DeGrom stays, wants to be on the East Coast. Cohen said it's number one priority. Also has said he admires his carpool buddy David Wright's franchise career, and I think Max will work him hard to come back. I think all of that is entirely valid, and I think all of that is entirely true, honestly. I'm with you, Ibby. I think that he is the only reason why I think he's not the top priority. I think that Diaz actually might get done before when free agency opens. Right. I think Diaz he said as much that he doesn't want to be anywhere else, which, by the way, kudos to him. And when was the last time the Mets organization had a guy come out flat and say, I want to be here, especially for the shit that some Met fans put him through when he first got here?
Yes.
Kudos for that guy for not only coming out and doing his damn thing, and then instead of saying, I did my damn thing, now I can go somewhere else and get paid where it's less stress, he's like, no, I did my damn thing and I love it here and I want to stay. Yeah. So kudos to Diaz for that. I think that the only way Diaz comes first is with that situation, because I think with DeGrom, it's just a different process. He has to opt out. And then once he opts out, he's probably going to test free agency. I think in the case of Diaz, I just think it gets done first, because I think closers get less money than an elite starting pitcher. And so I think Diaz gets sorted, but I don't necessarily think that you're wrong in the case that, they probably then jump to Jake, because I think they'll know, and Jake will let it be known whether or not he really wants to be here. I think they're going to do the best that they absolutely can. And Rael says, yes, you pronounce it right. Jazz in the house. So we got it. So that said, it moves us on to other players, and it moves us on to a guy like Brandon Nimmo. And Rael says, I think Nimmo stays 2. Cohen has built a strong relationship. Plus, he will drive it himself. Boris will play catch up. Would put money down that they won't pursue Judge. Okay. Look, that's a fair opinion. Judge is going to cost a ton of money, Ibby.
A lot of money.
And Judge is the second elephant in the room, if you will, because here's the thing. Brandon Nimmo fits this team like a glove. He is a great leadoff hitter. He has made himself into an excellent center fielder. There's a lot to love about Brandon Nimmo, but you're crazy if you don't at least try to get Judge. I'm sorry. Regardless, there's a lot of stuff going on with Twitter that says, hey, if the Mets don't keep Jake, they'll be really active for Judge. I just think unless the Yankees re-sign him immediately, you're insane to not just try. The Mets are going to have an opening in the outfield. I think they'll
try.
And the biggest need that this team has is power. Offensively, look, Brandon Nimmo does a lot of things, but Brandon Nimmo can be replaced on this team with other players that are already on this team. You could sit there and say that you can lead off Jeff McNeil. You can sit there and say that you could lead off Starling Marte. You can sit there and say that after a year of playing right field, Starling Marte can go back and play center field for a year. You can put Mark Canha, who's under contract, in center field for a year. Now, will either one of those guys be as good as Brandon Nimmo was defensively in center field? Maybe not.
Probably not.
But they can play an above-average center field. Hell, you can put Aaron Judge in center field day one. You could do that, and I just think that for as good as Nimmo is, Judge is obviously better. The other guy that I would argue is Trey Turner. Trey Turner is better than Brandon Nimmo. I'm sorry. 1 for 1, he's a better player. And if you're telling me that you can put Trey Turner at second base and you can put Starling Marte in center field and Jeff McNeil plays right field, that team is better than any team with Brandon Nimmo. If you're telling me that Judge plays center field and everything else stays status quo, that team is obviously better than any team with Brandon Nimmo. So I like Brandon Nimmo. I think the drop-off is pretty dramatic in terms of center fielders that the Mets could acquire, but I think that there is a level to be gained in terms of players the Mets could acquire to quote-unquote replace him when you're talking the top of the market with Aaron Judge and Trey Turner. They're just better players. They are two. Trey Turner might be the most underrated player in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
And Aaron Judge is perfectly rated. He's great. He's a top 5 player in baseball. I just think you have to, before you rush to bring Brandon Nimmo back, you have to investigate these other two guys. You just have to. You're wrong if you don't.
No, yeah, I think you're 100% right. And look, you're not going to find a bigger Brandon Nimmo fan than me. I'm a guy who's always chanting for the hashtag extend Nimmo. I've talked about him on this show since we started last year when we were talking about things, because I'll never forget you asked me, we started a conversation about who I would extend from this team, and I said that you gave me 3 choices, and I said, could I tell you that my option would actually be to extend Brandon Nimmo? That's who I wanted to keep on this team. And look, I'm with you when it's dependent on the situation, and again, it's the allocation of money. Money's going to be there to spend, but again, not $500 million is going to be spent. If you told me point blank, hey, Ib, you want Brandon Nimmo or do you want Aaron Judge? I mean, come on. Like, come on. Like, that in itself, like, when you say it like that in a vacuum, it's just like, come on. Like, it's Aaron Judge. If you said to me, hey, Ib, you want Brendan Nimmo or you want Trey Turner? I'm like, I want Trey Turner. Like, I mean, he's a better ball player. It's like, and the speed, and he can play second, and he could play the outfield too. He can play center field. Like, he's moved around. He's an athlete. Look, I think it's going to be very interesting. I do believe that from the stance of the money that Steve Cohen has alone, I think the Mets, whether true or not, their name is going to be bantered about when it comes to Aaron Judge because it's going to drive the market, okay? The Mets are now that team. They're going to be in on every single big-time player because they know that they have the guy with the biggest pockets, bar none. That's it. I know that there's a thought process of, oh, well, the Mets lost. Now, here comes Daddy Warbucks. He's going to drop all this cash, and he's going to just – he's taking Judge. He's taking DeGrom back. He's going to go out and get Verlander. He's going to do all this stuff because they lost. Perspective, okay? Perspective. He's not an idiot. He doesn't just burn cash. I think that they will be players for him. Whether or not they get him, I don't know. I truly believe that the guy wants to be a Yankee. I think he just wants them to get – I think he wants them to get to his number, and he stays. I think that is what the ultimate plan is. If the Yankees say, screw you, we'll tack on $20 million, which is still $50 million less than his asking, then he's hitting the market. And if the Giants pay him, if the Mets said, hey, we'll give you that number if that's all it is, then it's a different story. I think he wants to be a Yankee. I think the Yanks at this point, especially if they lose to the Stros, they're kind of at the mercy of Aaron Judge, because if you lose him, what the hell are you?
But, I mean, they're already at the mercy of Aaron Judge. I mean, the guy had an MVP
62 home runs,
he
right?
Set the
only
home run record and all that.
The only thing that would help them would be, hey, we have this plan. We don't want to pay the guy until he's 40 years old. If they win it all, they could say, thanks, Aaron, and then they could say adios. Like, that would be the only way that they could try and disguise it. But outside of that, they're at his mercy. I agreed 100%. But yeah, I do think that the Mets will be players for all big names. I do. And again, it's going to be dependent on how the money is allocated and how things go with our own. They're going to attack those three names first. You're going to get Diaz, DeGrom, and Nimmo. Once those things are figured out, then you go the rest of the way. Because look, there's a lot of guys. We don't have a bullpen. We legit don't have a bullpen. Okay,
yeah.
You got to find guys. All right, and look, we don't forget. We know our GM said that the market was going to be flush with talent, and then we only ended up with one guy kind of, holding ourselves in our hands at the end, and we didn't get a lot. Okay, you thought you were getting David Robertson, didn't happen. Now the guy's in the NLCS. Granted, he hasn't been that great, but still. Point is, there's a lot that this team needs to refill on. I do believe that those three get figured out relatively quick, but I'm with you also when it comes to Brandon Nimmo that Boris is going to put him out there because he is the prototypical baseball player in this new age baseball. He has those statistics that people want. He fits perfectly in Seattle. Okay, he fits perfectly there.
He does.
I'm telling you, he top of that lineup, him, Rodriguez. They're kind of falling out of love with Winker out there. Get him there. He fits that team like a glove. So don't think that a team like that can't swoop in and take him from you, because Boris is going to push for, I'm telling you, $120+ million is the number. I think that's the sweet spot, and whoever gets there first is going to get the guy.
Yeah, and Rael says, do you think the Mets would really bring in Judge and risk the chemistry they've built over their core? Cohen seems to love Nimmo, arm around him in every group photo. To that I say, chemistry be damned. I think chemistry is important, but I think it's overrated when you're talking about a player the caliber of Aaron Judge, who also, by all accounts, is the best guy, right? Like, you're not bringing in an Albert Bell to go back 100 years. You're bringing in a guy, you're swapping out one guy who's all love and positivity and smiles for another guy who's all love and positivity and smiles. Aaron Judge is, by all accounts, the nicest person in the world. So I don't think that necessarily matters. And again, he's Aaron freaking Judge. At the end of the day, good, bad, indifferent, whether he stays with the Yankees or not. Again, the thing is, he fits the team. There is no free agent. And I say this, and I was talking to my co-host for the goddamn Jets, Tom O'Boyle, who's a huge Yankee fan. And I was like, dude, no disrespect. I'm not saying this to tweak you. There is no free agent that fits any team better than Aaron Judge fits the Mets. Point blank. Yeah. I mean, money outside of it, in terms of what he does, what he is good at, and what he represents, he's exactly what the Mets need. The Mets had a lack of power. They had a lack of production in terms of protecting Pete Alonso in the lineup, and they're going to have a vacancy somewhere in their outfield, whether you want him to play center field or not. He fits the team perfectly. There is no free agent that fits any team better than Aaron Judge fits the New York Mets. And I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm not going to sit here and say it is going to happen. I'm just saying that the Mets are crazy if they don't go and at least investigate it. I want to jump back in the comments because there's so many. Chris Torres joining us a little late said, "What's good, guys? I'm taking Trey Turner in a heartbeat." I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, listen, you would take him on this team and any team today, tomorrow, the next day, next week. Stevie Mack says Diaz put it in his contract for them to chill with the trumpet anthems.
I'm sure he's liking that commercial, though, that he's got. I'm sure he likes that.
Yeah. Stevie Mack also said, with a solid infielder free agency, you can move McNeil to left, sign somebody to play second base. You absolutely could do that. McNeil's a plus defender. I think McNeil's a plus defender at second base, left field, or right field, to be completely honest. Let's see. Riel says, what about catcher? Glad Alvarez got the ankle surgery. Could have tendonitis as he had that floater when he was a kid. His D has always been a scouting issue. Would love Contreras. No Contreras. No Contreras. No Contreras.
I think there's a lot of dead money. Yeah, especially with McCann.
You can't do it.
I don't think it can happen. You want to get cheaper at the position, and when you have a talent like that, that allows you to go cheaper there. I don't think they're going to cut McCann. I want them to, but I don't think they're going to. But allows you to go cheaper somewhere like catcher, and then spread money elsewhere. So I don't think they're going to dump more money into the catcher spot. Good ball player, but I don't think they're going to.
Rail said Nito could be a trade piece. No one will take McCann. And see, that's actually where I disagree. I think the Mets catching tandem next year will be Alvarez and Nito. I think someone will take McCann. If you look at McCann's numbers, this is more of an indictment on catching in Major League Baseball. McCann is actually a fairly representative Major League catcher. Oh. And I think yeah, I know that's gross. That is a gross thing to say. And I know he's had 2 bad years here, even though I didn't hate the signing when the Mets made the signing. Having said that, I think someone will take McCann. The Mets will have to eat money, but I think
or prospect.
Yeah, but I do think that there is a pathway to trade McCann. I think you just want to get cheaper somewhere else. And Ray said, damn, striking out with you guys today. No, I mean, look, these things can happen. They're all possible. They all on the table. Contreras is a great player. It's just the Mets have the number 1 prospect in baseball who happens to be a catcher who, in a very small sample size, showed some of the reason why he's an electric ball player. I mean, he hit the ball so damn hard all over the place. And look, once he's up at the end of the season, it makes it that much easier for him to start the year as your catcher. And look, when we're talking about guys like Judge, Nimmo, DeGrom, Diaz, Trey Turner, they're all going to make money, and they're all going to make a lot of money. And the Mets are going to have to bring in some combination of those 5 players if they want to be good, right? It doesn't matter what the combination is, Ibby. We're talking about a ton of money, and the best way to do that is to get cheaper elsewhere. And getting cheaper elsewhere means trading McCann, even if you have to attach a prospect or some money, and going with Alvarez, who doesn't make any money, and going with Nito, who doesn't make any money.
James Dowling, what a good one.
James Dowling with a good one. It actually follows up on something he said earlier. Spend money on Bassett or pick up Cookie's option. Ibby, I bounce it to you first. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'll go to you first.
I think a lot of this depends on the Jake situation. And I only say that because I think the Cookie option is an easy one. I think you pick it up. It's $14 million, I think. I think you pick it up. I think because you have a lot of questions about what your staff might be, especially in the early goings, I think you pick it up and then you go from there. When it comes to Bassett, guy was a horse for us all year. You're going to need innings. right? Because again, I said this is an older staff, but it also comes with a price that I think he's going to decline that neutral option, which was at like 19 million, and I think he's going to push for a multi-year deal at 20 plus a year. So, are you going to pay this guy $20 million for the next 3 to 4 years? So, 60 to 80 million dollars to stay on the staff. I think that is truly dependent on Jake. And I think if Jake comes back, I don't think Bassett will be here. If Jake is gone, then I believe 1,000% that Bassett is going to be here. It sucks to say it that way because I thought that he would be here for a couple of years, but that's my thought on it. So to answer James's question, if I'm looking at one or the other, I think it's more likely at this point because I do think they're going to fight to keep Jake. I would say that of those two options, I think that the Cookie option is picked up and then Bassett is not kept. But again, my overall thought process is really dependent on Jake. But to answer the question at hand, I think it would be Cookie's option.
Yeah, look, I think the Mets are going into the season with basically one pitcher under contract locked up, and that is Max Scherzer, right? Obviously, McGill and Peterson are under contract, but what I would do, I think it's a slam dunk no-brainer to pick up Cookie's option. I think that gives you protection in the rotation. He had a good year this year. He's not the best pitcher in the world anymore. He's getting a little long in the tooth, but it gives you certainty right out of the gate. So I pick up that option immediately. The other thing with Bassett's mutual option is this. You don't pick up, if he picks up that option, if you agree to terms where you take that mutual option, great. Right. Okay, fine. Great. Then you have Bassett and it's fine.
Yeah.
But if he declines, now remember, it's a mutual option, team and player.
Right.
So if they cannot reach an agreement for that $19 million option, well, then it is a no-brainer to offer Bassett the qualifying offer, which is only slightly more. I think it's 19.4 this year. He's going to turn that down because it's not enough money over the option.
Right.
So I think the smart play with Bassett is offer him the option, have him decline it, offer him the qualifying offer, have him decline it, and then let him walk. I would let Bassett walk. I like Bassett. I think he's an innings eater. I think he's a bulldog. But I think the Mets have a good history right now in picking up that number 3, number 2 fringe starter. They were able to do it when they got Marcus Stroman. They were able to do it when they got Bassett. I think there will be a player available where they can go and get a pitcher that fills that kind of void, probably by trade again. I think there's going to be a way to fill that slot. I agree with you, Ibby, to a different extent where some of it does depend on what they do with Jake. I think that's entirely fair. But to me, Bassett just seems like the kind of player that you cannot prioritize when you're talking about the other 3 guys that we talked about.
You can't.
Diaz, Jake, and Nimmo. To me, those you want to start to get younger and get more cost certainty. I don't think that Bassett is the way to do that.
No, I'm with you because again, it's a tough spot because he is it sucked because I was a big fan of him this year and everything he brought to this team, and I think he's a damn good pitcher. But yeah, he's a distant 4th when it comes to those top 3 names that we started with. Like you have to get things sorted up there before you even think about him. And if taking care of those guys affects him coming back, well, then it's like, all right, well, I got to go elsewhere then because I have to take care of those 3 because that is my true priority. And I'm with you. Like even though because the Mets have spent the way that they've spent, the qualifying offer, I know I was reading it the other day. It might have been by Chris Soto, who's always great when it comes to the contract stuff, putting things out there on Mets Twitter. When it comes to the Mets in terms of qualifying offers and because of what they've spent, it's not exact. They wouldn't get the normal comp pick. It would be like whatever, like 10 picks later or whatever. But regardless, it would still be the right proper move to get something in return if you don't plan on extending the offer and he doesn't want that money, so he wants to go elsewhere. Offer it, regardless if it's 10 picks, 20 picks later, still get something in return.
Yeah, and I say that admitting that I like Bassett and they have a hole in, several holes in the rotation, and I would bring him back. I just think the mutual option being so close to what the qualifying offer is allows you to walk away from him. He's just the guy to me that I look at similar to how I looked at Michael Conforto last year. And I know the injury stuff came out with Conforto after the fact. I just look at, again, sometimes going into an offseason, catalysts of change. And I thought that Conforto was an easy one because I thought he was going to get paid from somebody else. And I just said, after 6 years, I like Michael Conforto, but I don't like him enough to give him $20 million a year. Let somebody else pay him. That's kind of how I feel about Bassett. I think he's very much a mathematics numbers game. Rael says, so what are you thinking about DH? And then follows it up by saying, do you spend or platoon Beatty and Escobar until Beatty can take over and Escobar can DH as a switch hitter, or do you pay for power if you can find it? Wish D-Wright can unretire and suit up as DH. Ibby, for me, that's kind of my plan. I don't want to lock the Mets into a DH spot, honestly.
I don't either.
I think that the Mets, I think it was admirable that Pete and Lindor played as much as they did. I don't want them to do that again. I think they were tired. I think they were sluggish. I would like to rotate that DH spot a little bit. Ideally, I would like Beatty to be the quote-unquote everyday third baseman that allows Escobar to play some third. I think it allows Guillorme to play some third. But then you have Escobar be your switch hitting most of the time DH, who also plays third. Maybe he plays some second too, gives some guys spells around the diamond. And then I think you open up that DH spot for Lindor, for Pete, for Alvarez on days where he's not catching. I think you open it up for Marte. You keep Marte fresh, keep his bat in the lineup. I think that's the Mets' best plan for DH, especially if they were to go out and sign Judge. Because I think then you have Judge, Alonso, Alvarez, Lindor, Escobar. You have these guys that you're going to want to keep fresh. And the best way to keep them fresh is to keep them, these half days off in the DH spot. So I would not look to spend at DH. I would look to spend elsewhere. And that to me solves the DH thing kind of in the way that Rael is laying out here, with Escobar filling that role like most of the time, but you allowing to just kind of swap guys in and out. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. And to just continue Rael's point, like I would definitely go with the idea into spring training, assuming everything is proper with his hand, which I believe he's going to be okay. But assuming everything is proper health-wise, I'm letting Beatty go into camp with full intentions of trying to win the job and allowing him to take the job, to then, like you said, put Escobar in a spot where he can spot start. He's the bat off the bench to switch here. He can fill in here and there. And then again, still protecting Beatty in the sense where Escobar can easily plug in if he goes to a slump, or Guillorme can plug in if he goes to a slump, like allowing yourself that ability to rotate the DH spot and keep guys fresh. But we also have to remember, and this is why we talk about Judge in the sense, not so much because of the name, but also because of just the overall power. What we talked about last offseason, how we spoke on how this team needed a thumper, needed another big bat. You still got to find a big bat in that sense, because I think this team needs power. I love the idea of Trey Turner. I'm not saying I don't want him. I would gladly take him, but this team still needs to find another sense of power. And again, that can easily be Francisco Alvarez. I'm not saying it can't be. I hope it is. I hope he becomes a power hitter like that.
They need a more proven power bat. You're 100% right.
You need a proven power bat, and who that can be, I don't know. I would have to look at the guy. I would have to look at who is a legit free agent, like it's going to be out there. And let's not forget, the shift is done. The shift is going to open up some things for some guys who have been killed by the shift. With that disappearing, you look at it and you might say, well, so-and-so might be able to rejuvenate what they were because the shift is no longer here. So it's little things like that you're going to have to look into. But yeah, just trying to find power in that sense, I think is going to be very important, because that, what we saw in the end, was something that really, really was debilitating for the Mets.
Yeah. I know we're about an hour and 13 in. Ibby, do you have to run, or can we get to a few more questions before we get out of here?
Probably a couple more, maybe like 5 more minutes.
Yeah. I think there's a few more that are worth bringing up. First of all, Rail just says, finally hit one with you guys today, which I think is absolutely hilarious. And yeah, seriously, thank you for keeping those comments coming in. And of course, we're going to agree, we're going to disagree, and that's kind of how this goes.
That happens. It's fine.
And to your point, Ibby, Chris says, I would let Nimmo go if that means we get Trey Turner and fill that righty DH with Jose Abreu, maybe trade Vientos for starting pitching with control. And follows it up by saying, imagine a lineup: Marte, Turner, Lindor, Pete, Abreu, McNeil, Escobar, Canna, Alvarez. Yeah, that does sound pretty great. I just think, to me, Abreu is a guy who is a little bit past his prime. I would have been excited about Abreu 3, 4, 5 years ago. I think now Abreu is going to be a complementary piece. And I think that I would rather get Trey Turner and not get Abreu and swap these guys in again. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think...
In that case, you could find cheap power. You could find cheap power elsewhere. Like, you could... Look, people don't want to hear it, but you could find another style of a Vogelback to fill in as a power for that spot. And let's not forget, he's coming back too.
Right. You could get a Trey Mancini or somebody,
you know. Something, yeah.
I think for me, it's a good idea, Chris. Again, because to your point, Ibby...
Absolutely.
Trey Turner's a great ball player. I called him at the top half of the show maybe the most underrated player in baseball. Like, people are like, oh, he's this scrappy guy. Like, he's terrific. He is unbelievable, excellent, terrific baseball player. But I just think that Abreu is more of a consolation piece. I would look at Abreu like this. If you told me the Mets are bringing back Jake, right? And so they're paying him a ton of money. The Mets are bringing back Diaz, so they're paying him a ton of money. Aaron Judge re-signed with the Yankees. Trey Turner went somewhere else so he could play shortstop, so the Mets bring back Brandon Nimmo. If you're telling me the Mets brought back almost the exact same team, now, to me, Abreu starts to look a little bit more enticing, because the Mets haven't addressed right-handed power and they spent a lot of money elsewhere. I would say then, oh, okay, you're bringing in a proven right-handed hitting power bat. That to me then becomes a little bit more enticing. But I think if you bring in a guy like Turner or you bring in a guy like Judge or something, like, you just don't have the room, I don't think, for Abreu, he's gonna be in your DH role. He's not playing first. He's old. I was going to say that I wanted Jose Abreu at this deadline. I have the text right here. Okay? I sent the text to one John Saponaro on 7/14/22 at 7:52 p.m. And I said, I want the White Sox to go in the absolute tank over the next 15 days and make Abreu available. That's the bat that I felt would have fit this team for this year. Okay. It didn't happen. That's when they went on like that little mini run where, La Russa wasn't drinking or whatever, who knows. But when that was happening and they decided to just hold people, no one got dealt. That was the guy I wanted this year. And I thought it made sense for this year. Going forward, probably not as much, but I love the idea still that Chris threw out there. It could work, but again, I like, to your point, John, I like the flexibility. If I'm going to spend on a Turner type, then I would allow myself to rotate pieces and then I can still find a proven power bat for a cheaper, like, would you do if you could have a Trey Turner, but then you go out and you sign as a cheap power bat outfielder like a Jock Peterson? Would you take that? Absolutely. 100%.
So yeah, you can do something like that. So
that's the thing. It comes down to that. And it's really funny because I made that comment and Chris said, yeah, well, you're right. That makes sense. And then when you pulled out the text, just all crying with laughter emojis from Chris. And then Rail said, Ibby with the receipts. And of course,
Gary V over here.
Ibby hanging out with Saleh, of course, meaning Robert Saleh, coach of the New York Jets. And Chris, I don't know if you're a Jets fan, but I just want to do a cheap plug that I also, on this network live every week, I also host a Jets show with my buddy Tom O'Boyle and former flight crew cheerleader Kimberly Cantoni. It's called The Goddamn Jets. So if you are a Jets fan, and that's why, you should tune into that one as well. Usually we go live every Tuesday. It was actually live right before this one today because of our schedules and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is we try to wrap up this conversation. they have options. And, Stevie Mack, who's thrown out a bunch of comments throughout the show, says, don't forget, if you don't keep Jake, Nola and Rodon will also be out there. Also, Justin Verlander, who's, older. And yeah, he's not going to be your long-term solution, but there are other pitchers that the Mets can pivot to that are going to give them, ace level or 1A level type stuff, even at this point in their careers. So look, it was a disappointing end to the year, Ibby, but there are some exciting moments for the Mets here.
Yeah. There was exciting things that happened throughout the year. There's exciting things on the horizon. I hate the fact that our season ended when it did. I wanted to be talking with you throughout the playoffs and experiencing these things and, just feeling that energy that, again, I continue to chase because, again, I don't think the feeling that I had in 15 is what I had in this playoff series because it was done so quick and they played like garbage. So I'm still chasing that high another year. But you're right. I'm excited because there are big things on the horizon. This is a huge offseason. We, for years, have dealt with the Mets being on the cold stove and not the hot stove when it came to all this stuff. And guess what? The Mets are going to be a nonstop talking point because there's a lot that they have to do. They're going to accomplish what they need to get done because they have to, because a lot of the guys that they don't have a team right now. They got a lot of money wrapped up, but they still need a lot of pieces that they got to sign. You're going to see some new fresh faces, some exciting faces, and that should entice you and excite you as a fan because you finally have something to look forward to, not only for the offseason, but for the following seasons to come because this team, no matter what, no matter how you felt after this, no matter how you feel today, maybe you need another week, maybe you need another month before you want to dive back in, this team is going to compete moving forward, and that is a good thing.
It is absolutely a great thing. Chris Torres says, yeah, I'm a casual fan. I'm jumping into football more now, so I'll jump on that. Well, if you want to follow us, you can do it over at Goddamn Jets Pod is the handle on Twitter and on YouTube, on Twitter and on Instagram so that you know when we're going live and all that fun stuff. Stevie Mack makes a great point, Ibby. We did not bring this up. Heard Arenado might be opting out as well, although I'm not a fan of him after earlier this year, LOL, which is fair. But, that is a good point. And I didn't even think of it, and I wanted to bring it up because he may opt out. Arenado is the kind of player that even at this point in his career, if you're not going to get Judge, I would maybe move some things around. All the talking points we just had, maybe I would move some things around to bring in an Arenado if he were to opt out. I understand. Look, I like Brett Baty, and I think Brett Baty can be the truth. Honestly, I love his swing, but the Mets are going to have to do some dealing if they want to stay reasonable within their salary, right? So I just think that there's a possibility that, let's say Arenado opts out. You could sign Arenado to play third. Then that allows you to trade Brett Baty in a package for a starting pitcher or for another area of need for a player that's under team control. I do think that something like that, if Arenado were to opt out, is a possibility, Ibby.
No, it absolutely is. If that's the way that they wanted to go, that, if you're going to sign someone of that caliber, then yes, you could make a player like that available, even though it's one of your younger talents. You can make him available to try and better yourself in another area, to get another younger talent, maybe a younger talent that's living out in no-name Anaheim right now who's bad-mouthing the team that he's on. I don't know. Maybe that guy. Who knows?
We didn't even have a chance to bring up that guy. This has been such a long show.
We'll talk about him all off-season because that's the way it's going to go. But yeah, I'm with you in that sense. But I think Arenado's going to end up staying. But probably. The thought process, I get it. And look, I would never say no. Look, I would never say no to a lot of these guys. I would gladly take them on my team.
Another guy we didn't bring up that also fits that bill, Carlos Correa, is probably going to opt out. We have to get out of here soon because we're way over time. But these are guys that, you can't bank on today on October 19th being free agents. Arenado, Ohtani trade, Stevie Mack says, yeah, you need at least 2 hours to talk about Ohtani.
It's true.
Look, we're going to have a long off season to talk about all of these guys, but that comment about Arenado made me think of, hey, yeah, Correa, Arenado, we didn't even think about those guys. And Stevie Mac says Correa is friends with Lindor. You could put him at third base. Again, you could start to move around guys because the Mets are going to have to be creative. That is the long and short of this. That is the best way to put a wrap on this episode, is that the Mets are going to spend a lot of money. The Mets are going to be good next year. The Mets are going to be competitive next year. And it all has to do with the fact that they're going to need to be creative. Don't attach yourself to these players. Attach yourself to the orange and blue. Stay true, as Ibby's hat says, to the orange and blue, because, this team might look a little different. It'll be a bummer if for some reason Jacob deGrom isn't on this team, but that's just what it is. It's just what it is. And I want to take us out on a couple of comments, Ibby. James Dowling, nice words, said, missed you guys. Glad you're back. We're happy to be back. Rael says, agree, James. So glad you guys are back. 100% the best pod. Appreciate that. And then Rael says, just to keep the football conversation going, John, you need to tweet out when you go live with your Jets pod, live contingent of Mets gangrene crossovers. So, so I'll probably start doing that maybe, Ibby, if that's okay with you. Ibby is not a Jets fan, but, he does.
I'm a closet supporter of the JETSs. Don't you worry. I still support. I'm happy that they're doing well. I have a lot of Jet fan friends. I am.
All right, fair enough. Ibby, we're about an hour and a half. You have any last final thoughts before we get out of here?
I have nothing else. The only thing I wanted to say was it felt good to finally get this stuff off my chest. It felt good to talk again. I'm excited for the offseason. I'm excited to talk with you, John. I'm excited to get more guests back on. We'll get back on that, to get some friends back on for a second time, third time, whatever it might be. Maybe some new people. I'm still trying to get some people to lock in to come on here with us, because there's still some very cool people out there that I think we can have great conversations with. And like I said, this team is going to be very active over this offseason, so it's going to be a fun one.
It's going to be really exciting. Like Ibby said, we're going to have some guests on maybe for the second or third time. And we appreciate you guys. Look, an hour and a half is a long time to do a podcast. It's a long time to do a live stream. And there's been tons of you guys coming in and out and being really active in the chat. And we appreciate you hanging on with us. We usually go about an hour, but I think being off for 2 weeks and having so much to talk about, it was kind of necessary to do this. Stevie Mac doing our job for us says, hit the like button before you.
We got to get better at that. We got to get better at that. Subscribe.
Tell your
friends.
On. All of that stuff. You should do that so that you don't miss episodes. And you know what? The word of mouth on Mets Twitter and in this Mets community has been absolutely great. People telling people jumping on. If you watch us on YouTube, you can comment live. I think if you watch us on Twitter, that's great, but we don't get the comments at the same speed. Stuff like that. So anyway, we appreciate it, guys. We appreciate the fact that you missed us. We're sorry that we left you when we did. Mostly it was my fault. Ibby was here. It was just me. I couldn't do it. I couldn't be live when we needed to be. So we'll be back next week. Plenty of Mets stuff to talk about. We appreciate all you guys. We love you all, and we're going to get out of here. I'm John. That's Ibby. This is Till Mets Do Us Part. You can check us out tomorrow, the audio version of this show, courtesy of the Chop Sports Network, wherever it is you get your podcast. We'll see you guys later. Peace.